date today. And from somewhere out there, an old ship's bridge is about to come back to life.
Check elapsed time, Mr. Solow. My chronometer's running backwards, sir. Time warp. We're going backward in time.
Engage warp drive, Mr. Solow, and blast us back to the future to celebrate the galaxy's favorite TV space show.
I always knew as soon as our chemistry started to work, the Spock-Kirk chemistry, that I was lucky.
There must have been some rivalry. Must have been. Anyway, it makes good copy that there was.
Captain, guess what? The ship is about to blow up.
It was a gripping, mind-tingling script. And so I said, yeah, this is going to be an interesting ride.
By the end of the first season, I felt no compunction about leaving.
Set your phasers to stun, beam yourselves down, and welcome back the original cast of Star Trek.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
With these legendary lines first broadcast on American television in September 1966, Star Trek was launched. And with this newly discovered home movie footage of Starfleet life, journey into space once more with Bones McCoy, Lieutenant Uhura, Scotty, Chekhov, Sulu, Spock, and Captain James T. Kirk.
The stories will involve human beings in jeopardy. Sometimes me, I play Captain Kirk of the spaceship. Sometimes other people, but although there are monsters and fights and runnings and carryings on, it has to do with people.
Bill relished the role. I mean, you see an actor bite into a role and devour it and make it totally his. And it was a wonderful thing to see.
Originally, the Starship Enterprise was to be captained by actor Jeffrey Hunter. But after the first pilot episode, Hunter decided against space travel and dematerialized. So a new leader had to be found by Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry.
Roddenberry and I, at different times, had seen Bill Shatner perform. And in some of the things he did, he was just marvelous.
I want this man to know that nobody can protect him. And if he thinks influence and protection can reach into this court, he's wrong, that there are no deals.
This was a true leader. I mean, this is a guy who will yell, "Follow me, man," over the hill, and really, he'll go first.
I had just come off a film on Alexander the Great, and I had worked for months. I'd worked on weights, and so I was really in great shape.
Kirk's loyal first officer was Mr. Spock. Motionless, logical, he had a human mother and a Vulcan father, a mixing of the gene pool that had extraordinary results.
Is there anyone on this ship who even remotely looks like Satan?
Gene had originally conceived the Mr. Spock character as being diabolic, as being almost satanic, with the pointed ears, with the kind of reddish complexion, and at one time with a tail.
It was always the pointed ears and the arched eyebrows we developed during the process of developing the makeup, and I developed the haircut and so forth. I started studying Sherlock Holmes to get a sense of what his logical approach to issues was all about. And little by little the character built.
Flawlessly logical.
And I didn't know it then. He's told me many times since then that he was kind of like living it, off stage and off screen and on screen. I thought that was him, you know.
So I was often the one in the group where everybody's sitting around telling jokes and laughing, and I'm sitting there stone-faced. And somebody would say, "Oh, Leonard's into a Spock thing," you know. Try to make me laugh.
All hailing frequencies open.
Jazz singer and actress Nichelle Nichols played communications officer Lieutenant Uhura. At her auditions, the character had yet to be named. Then producer Gene Roddenberry saw a book Nichelle was carrying with a title taken from the Swahili word for freedom.
Gene said, I like the name Uhuru, but it's a little harsh for a woman. I don't know yet whether I want it to be first name or last name. And he said, but it's a little harsh. And I said, why don't we do an alliteration of it and do it Uhura? And he wanted this to be international, interracial. And that's how Uhura became from the United States of Africa.
Bases locked, Captain.
George Takei, a young Japanese-American actor, was impressed by Gene Roddenberry's utopian vision for Star Trek when going up for the part of helmsman Solow.
He said you wanted to use science fiction as a metaphor for commentary on issues of our time. And the strength of this starship is in its pluralism, different cultures coming together, working as a team. It was science fiction that had a contemporary punch, and I wanted to be a part of it.
Take us back to where we're supposed to be, Mr. Solow. Warp Factor 1.
Warp Factor 1.
Most of the people we cast were not well known. I mean, they weren't in a lot of television series. Probably the most well-known person was DeForest Kelley.
I am Leonard McCoy, Senior Medical Officer aboard the USS Enterprise.
D was in Westerns for many, many years. Always the bad guy, right?
DeForest brought this southern charm that he found very difficult to overcome by being a curmudgeon. So it was kind of like awkward, you know. He had to kind of force it.
What you want is unimportant right now. What you will get is what is required by the book.
He was deceptively good in the role, and without showing a lot of effort. And the chemistry between he and I developed very quickly on the insult banter level. He would call me pointy-eared, green-blooded, whatever, and I would call him a witch doctor, and we'd be off. It's great.
I'm trying to thank you, you pointed-eared hobgoblin.
You're welcome, I believe, is the correct response.
Not long into their 5-year mission, a new recruit joined the bridge of the Enterprise.
Navigation, check-off here.
By bringing a Russian on board, was Star Trek making a political comment on Soviet-American relations during the dark days of the Cold War? Not quite.
There was a more pragmatic reason than all of that, and that had to do with finding a younger actor to appeal to the bubblegum set, you know, the 8 to 12-year-olds.
This place is even better than Leningrad.
We did get the desired reaction because I got a lot of mail, you know, on lined paper and pencil, telling me I was groovy. And it was because they were using as their prototype Davy Jones of the Monkees.
Hey, we're the Monkees, and people say we monkey around.
They wanted long hair, they wanted the Monkees look. They shipped me off to Max Factor, big cosmetic hair place on Hollywood Boulevard, and I came back with 4 or 5 different wigs, blonde and red and brunette, and I tried them all on, and they looked at me, and then they tried them all on, which was really peculiar, I thought. I said, what am I getting myself into?
Warp 6, sir.
But it didn't really bother me. I was okay with it. I was just so grateful to work, you know, to go in every week, to prostitute my craft and try to be funny with lines like Warp Factor 4.
But one man didn't see the joke when he found himself sharing the spotlight with the new arrival.
I was just livid with jealousy, I'll fess up, and frustration. I hadn't met Walter Koenig. I hated the name Walter Koenig. And we had to share a dressing room to boot.
How do you figure it, Chekhov?
I'm really paranoid. I mean, there's no question that if I found somebody giving me, you know, looking at me askance and with hostility, I would have recognized it. And I never did. So he's a hell of a better actor than I ever gave him credit for, because I was never, and I do think George is a wonderful actor, but I was never aware of that.
Boldly going on, Spock becomes a pointy-eared sex symbol, putting his captain's nose out of joint.
There must have been some rivalry. Must have been. Anyway, it makes a good copy that there was.
And see just what else was going on below decks on the Starship Enterprise. Aye, aye, Captain. A crew's only as good as the ship it sails in, and however handsome the Starship Enterprise looked, at times Star Trek's vision of the future seemed more DIY than designer.
Our worst adversary in making these episodes was money and time. Everything was done so fast, so fast. We were on a very, very skimpy budget. The show was sold very inexpensively to get it on the air. And that's why we had such limited sets, and that's why our rocks looked like paper mache, because they were.
We had to be creative and imaginative and cheap, especially cheap.
A key man in keeping Star Trek going where no TV series had gone before was Starfleet's Mr. Fix-It, co-producer Bob Justman.
We were the scavengers of the studio. We would take a walk and inspect the contents of the various dumpsters that were spotted around the studio. And we would retrieve packing materials, generally styrofoam shapes, and no one would question it because the actors didn't make anything out of it.
Barring pages, Captain.
I had to make that console mine. All these buttons there that really didn't work when I pressed them, you know. They lit up when the special effects man pulled the switch.
McCoy would operate, and he would open people up and suture them closed with an electronic device which was magnificent in its simplicity.
Stand by to close.
People have claimed that what he was really using was a salt grinder. Well, I'm here to tell you now that that's not the truth. It wasn't a salt grinder. I believe it was a pepper grinder.
Energize.
Another myth is that Captain Kirk actually said, "Beam me up, Scotty." Sorry, but he never did.
Kirk to Enterprise. Lock on transporters. Beam us up.
The transporter room came about because Bob Justman was scared that we go over budget every show if we had to land the Enterprise.
And the transporter beam became Star Trek's most famous special effect.
It turned out to be a major asset in the show, and it was very good for action as well, and it was very good for creating problems with the transporter and so forth. Actually, absolutely, literally, because landing and taking off in the ship would have been an expensive special effect.
You had to get there to make the story work. So instead of lowering the gangplank, taking a thing, getting down, you beam. Now you're there, and you continue on with your story.
Great ships from the past hold on to their secrets, and this had been true of the Starship Enterprise, until now. Treasures that have risen to the surface are these remarkably candid scenes from Starfleet life, filmed on set by Enterprise crewman, actor Billy Blackburn.
My character was Lieutenant Hadley, and I kept my mouth shut at the bridge for 3 years after being told by the assistant director, just sit there. And I did, and but I also did a lot of the other characters, too. I took my camera on the set, and the first time I took it, nobody said anything. Everybody, the cameraman was looking at me taking it, and Bill was saw me do it. So then I always had it with me. Leonard would give me the sign, and Bill would perform for me. And he was always upstaging DeForest. I mean, deliberately for the camera. think there's one segment there shooting the whole bit, and finally Leonard looks up and he goes, "Get out of the shot, Billy. Get out of the shot." And of course it was for fun, you know.
And no matter on which planet they were filming, Bill Shatner would always be accompanied by his beloved dog.
Bill always had these wonderful Dobermans, and he often had them in his dressing room. Yeah. I enjoyed them. They were great. They never attacked me. You know.
I had never seen Morgan before, and that was his name. Beautiful Doberman. In the sequence, Morgan actually goes and circles the set when Bill was on it by the pylon. The dog is in the background, and he kept circling and circling.
Dobermans can be very protective of the master. He would threaten you with the dogs, you know. "Look out, Sterling will get you. Look out."
But it wasn't the dogs who were after Mr. Spock. He found himself becoming something of a pointy-eared sex symbol.
Until now, there was always a place in here where no one could come.
I was pleasantly surprised by it. I thought, that's interesting. Being me, male and inside the character, I didn't quite get it. I don't quite understand it. I began to give it some thought, and at least logically, I began to hear and see certain clues.
I'm in love with you, Mr. Spock.
And there was something for a woman to want to be nurturing with Spock. I understood that.
Now tell me, did she happen to make any comment about those ears?
And she found them the most attractive human characteristic of all.
He could wield much more emotion out of a raised eyebrow at the proper time than a two-page speech.
I don't know if Bill's going to say he was upset, but the Mr. Spock character became so important. I would get phone calls from Life magazine, from this magazine, from that magazine, saying, "We'd like to come to the set. We want to do something with Mr. Nimoy, etc., etc." We kind of try to keep that down some, because Bill was the star of the show, and the second banana is getting all the attention.
There must have been some rivalry. Must have been. Anyway, it makes good copy that there was.
I never thought of myself as anything other than a supporting actor, working equally as hard as Bill Shatner, not being paid as well, by the way, and wanting as much success as he did. I was competitive, I was ambitious, but I never misunderstood what role I was playing.
And I keep trying to remember whether I felt envy. And all I can remember is feeling a momentary, days or weeks of anxiety about the popularity of Spock. But I don't remember, being hysterical about it.
Jim!
My recollection of those days was camaraderie.
I'm pleased to see you, Captain.
And then, over the years, the friendship, the fondness, and the love between Leonard Nimoy and myself is I can't remember when it wasn't.
For both Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, turning round a Star Trek episode in 6 or 7 filming days, week on week, meant for a punishing work schedule.
I was very disciplined, and I always saw to it that I got enough sleep. Head down on the pillow at 9:30 at night, out, and up the next morning at 5:30. I need 8 hours sleep, or I did then when I was working. I could get up at 5:30 in the morning and be at work at 6:30. If I caught a cup of coffee on the way out the door, and I could get to the studio by 6:30. And then I'd have some breakfast as I'm sitting in the chair. They'd bring me breakfast. And it wasn't just the ears. The eyebrows were very time-consuming because they laid on hair by hair each morning. And then the rest of the makeup. It was an hour and a half. And I could learn lines during that period of time. I could study my script.
Sometimes the pages would come down late, and we'd be getting pages to a scene we didn't know the script to. So you had to play everything. So you didn't know what your character was or how I felt about you or what you felt about me. So you might as well play hate and love. I hate you and I love you. So maybe it's a little anxiety, but I don't care. Because you play everything.
I'm Captain Kirk!
If Kirk and Spock were feeling the pressure, other crew members were also sending out distress signals. Concerned about her lack of lines and meaningful action, at the end of Season 1, Lieutenant Uhura was ready to desert her post.
Since it wasn't going to be this marvelous role that I expected it to be, the scenes were constantly cut.
Mr. Spock, sometimes I think if I hear that word frequency once more, I'll cry.
My focus was not being upset about that, but going, oh, okay, that's the way this industry is. So by the end of the first season, I felt no compunction about leaving.
But before she could jump ship, Nichelle changed her mind following a close encounter with a very special fan.
I was told that there was someone who wanted to meet me, and I thought it was a fan. And I turned and looked in the face of Dr. Martin Luther King. And he smiled with that marvelous face and said, "Yes, I am the avid fan." And he convinced me that I absolutely could not leave the show. I had a responsibility. He was out there working on civil rights so that I could be, and people like me could be on that television.
Why don't you tell me I'm an attractive young lady? Or ask me if I've ever been in love?
It was very, very current, very much in touch with the zeitgeist, what's going on in the world.
Where I come from, size, shape, or color makes no difference.
Vietnam was going on, Martin Luther King was going on, the civil rights movements and so forth, all happening all around us, and I was very much in tune with it.
Star Trek may have been boldly going where no TV series had gone before, but sadly it was not a hit. Ratings were low, and at the end of the second series, the show received the Vulcan death grip.
It was a small, loyal audience. I think we averaged around 5 million viewers. Now, 5 million fans or viewers may seem like a lot, but in television terms back then it wasn't.
Faced with the loss of their favourite series, enraged fans got their own communication lines open, setting up a massive chain letter campaign.
There was something like 110,000 letters came in a 4 or 5 week period. They were really inundated. There was some successful chain letter networkings done. People put out word and said to 10 people, talk to 10 people, and the audience that we had was not large, but it was intense and vocal.
I had a friend of mine, an executive at NBC, who went to his car in the NBC secured parking lot, and someone had written on his car, "Don't cancel Star Trek." I mean, it became, the CIA should be as good as these guys were.
NBC on air at the end of one of the episodes announced that Star Trek would be back the following season, and the legend was they did that to stop the mail from coming. So I guess it worked.
So the Enterprise was salvaged for another voyage, but was she still a happy ship?
Don't you want to hear, she said, how much we all hated you?
As the Starship Enterprise set about exploring strange new worlds, it seemed that Captain James T. for Tiberius Kirk led from the front in keeping his gallant crew happy.
And it was a good set. It was a good set. Everybody got along. Bill Shatner was very funny. He kept the whole tone very lighthearted. There were things that were going on that I wasn't necessarily aware of, behind closed doors, where there was some politicking and some stuff, but it really didn't involve me. I just, I wasn't on the contract, so I didn't know from week to week whether I would work. And I get a peek at the first draft and in the script, and, there's Chekhov. So it was like opening a gift every morning.
The Enterprise sailed on, but mutinous whispers began to be heard from the lower decks. As the crew gave voice to their problems with Bill Shatner, interesting additions were made to the captain's log.
We wanted to do more, and that he would, on occasion, intervene and have the focus redirected in his direction.
And before you know it, you're a voice, off-screen voice, and the camera's focused on his nibs.
He could do things that were very insensitive to the fellow actors.
Is that all?
No, sir. They also compared you with that Danubian slime devil.
I see.
And then they said that you were...
I get the picture, Scotty.
You know, and they all had these complaints like, you didn't stay on the set. You went back to your dressing room. Well, yes, I did. I had lines to learn or things to do.
Bill, I think, honestly didn't realize what he was doing.
20 years later, I'm doing research on, I think, my first book. And then I get to Nichelle, and Nichelle in the evening, and the tape's going, and I'm saying, well, Nichelle, we had fun, and we loved each other, and we kissed, and we had, and we did, and we went, and we held hands, and we were great buddies, Nichelle and I. And then I turn the tape off and say, thank you, Nichelle, it was great. And she says, wait a minute. I said, what? Don't you want to hear, she said, how much we all hated you? What?
And to his credit, he called me and he said, was I really that way? And we talked, and we've talked since then. We've repaired our friendship.
I've long apologized for anything I might have done, could have done, thought of doing, didn't do, but they thought I did, that they did, that they didn't, they think that they might have, that they could have, that they wanted to, that I didn't do, that I've apologized. And I apologize again. But 35 years, forgive me, for God's sakes.
Starfleet life may have had its frustrations, but there was the occasional opportunity to shine, and Nichelle Nichols made American TV history in one of Star Trek's most celebrated episodes, Plato's Stepchildren.
I've read the script and I thought, oh, this is a good script for Uhura, for a role. Now they just don't screw it up, and cut it up as though, oh, this will be lovely. Never occurred to me that it was the first interracial kiss.
I'm so frightened, Captain.
I remember them saying, oh, there'll be some, there were going to be some southern local stations that wouldn't play it.
My fears would fade.
Never before on American television had a kiss between black and white actors been screened.
They didn't cut it, and they didn't change it. The only thing that got changed was it was originally written for Uhura and Spock. And Bill got the script and said, oh, no.
But this was one of Star Trek's last memorable storylines. By the time it was through Series 3, somewhat short of its 5-year mission, it was obvious that the Enterprise had lost its warp factor.
The quality of the scripts declined the third season. It was bug-eyed monsters. Oh! And it didn't have the kind of contemporary cutting edge that the first two seasons had.
I was aware that something was amiss, and I was frankly hoping that we would either make a drastic change or stop.
Very early in the third season, it was already known that we were not going to be picked up. So it was sort of like just finishing out the assignment for a lot of people.
Shunted to a late-night slot, Star Trek's audience figures declined further. The last episode was broadcast in the USA on the 3rd of June, 1969.
I was relieved when it was over. I don't know if I've ever stopped. I was relieved because I didn't see any improvement happening, and I was very frustrated and unhappy. I was unhappy, and I was happy to see it end.
I was getting a divorce or just divorced, and that took all the money I had made in Star Trek. So now I was pretty much busted out.
It was total silence, and I found myself in a very bad place psychologically because I didn't know what to do with my life. And it was very unstructured. I mean, I didn't know what the reason was to get out of bed in the morning.
I was very lucky because the next week I was on the set of Bracken's World, a TV series at 20th, playing a hippie photographer.
And then you say, well, you know, then I'll go on to next.
Star trekking across the universe. On the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk. Star trekking across the universe. Slowly going forward 'cause we can't find reverse.
The mission was over, the crew disbanded, but repeat runs and international sales meant that, if anything, Star Trek's popularity grew. And if the faithful fans didn't have a series anymore, at least they had each other. The very first Star Trek convention was held in 1972.
I got a call from New York saying that they're having a convention. I thought, convention? That's a little exaggerated, isn't it? Because I hope they don't expect me to fly out, all the way there. And they said they would pay my way. I said, these women are mad.
I'm told that already for this one there are 10,000 people pre-registered, and the expectation is for 30,000 people to attend.
It was an amazing discovery, and this was just 2 years after cancellation.
There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, starboard bow. There's Klingons on the starboard bow, Jim.
Even today, over 35 years since the first episode, fans pay homage to Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the original generation.
Thanks so much.
New captains and new Star Trek shows have come and gone, but the old crew still have pulling power.
Oh, that's a large turnout. Is that for you or for me?
It's about time I do this. I've seen you so often at the conventions. Yeah, I've been doing them for a long time.
These actors could be sitting at a restaurant and make a mark on a napkin, and a fan would scoop it up and frame it and put it on his wall. I mean, it became, these are gods.
I'm Cadius. This is Kidius. We're from the planet Catonian.
This world that Star Trek creates and the kind of mentality that it invites.
We fell in love with Spock because of the ears.
It just threw us for like a... It just,
we were gone. We were
Yeah.
just totally gone. As soon as we saw those ears, we just loved them.
You run into people occasionally who cross over the line and don't quite live in the real world anymore.
We are Klingons!
I had somebody who asked me if I wanted to sacrifice a chicken in her room. And I demurred. I sent another actor from another television series, and we had a rather bizarre experience. Turned out that the lady had a fiancé, and although she explained to the actor that they had an understanding, evidently the fiancé wasn't apprised of this understanding and tried to crash the door down.
We're losing power on the warp engines.
How bad is it?
We can barely read it, but I don't like the looks of it.
A favourite with the fans was Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott, known to all as Scotty.
And my part was the engineer. And I loved being the engineer. Because to me, he was a world to himself.
And that old engineer's kept his motors running. Aged 80, he became a father again, though more recently he's been seriously ill.
Well, of course, I've had a long medical history where it was double pneumonia and 3.5 months I was in hospital.
Now 84, he's recovered enough to make a special visit to meet his fans at this year's Grand Slam Star Trek convention in Pasadena, California. And it's not just the fans who've honoured the crew of the Enterprise. At a special ceremony in 1976, the real space cadets from NASA named a space shuttle in their honour.
The Air Force Band started up with the Star Trek music, which immediately sent chills down our spines. And then from around the corner came the shuttlecraft, and across the nose it said Enterprise. It was, wow, it was just amazing. It's a moment that I think would be hard-pressed to capture again.
For Nichelle Nichols, NASA did come calling again. In 1978, she joined the space program to help ensure that astronaut crews weren't just white and male, but more like the multicultural bridge of the USS Enterprise.
They said they were having a problem attracting women, and especially minority women and men. I underwent a couple of weeks of limited astronaut training so that I would know what they were going to be going through, and I was briefed on what NASA wanted and was looking for. And so then I traveled throughout the country in the next 6 months and identified qualified people and recruited them right and left.
For 10 long years, Star Trek was gone, if not forgotten. Then, in 1979, they all went a boldly going once more as the original cast were reunited for the first Star Trek movie.
But when the movie offer came along, I had very mixed feelings. I was not eager to jump back into Spock again.
How about it, Spock?
Fascinating.
For so long, people had been saying, "Oh, you're typecast, you're typecast." And then it got to the point where everyone else had signed on, and I found myself in a position where, for no really good reason as far as the audience was concerned, I might be the only one that didn't come back, and I didn't want to be in that position, frankly. I thought, I don't want to be that spoil sport that says I'm not going to do this, So I signed on.
Star Trek the Motion Picture proved a hit, and the crew were recruited for a lucrative 6 feature film mission.
So this total failure from a television point of view, from a financial point of view, but never from a fan point of view, has turned out to be the largest property worth billions.
Sync.
And marker.
And action!
And grabbing the chance to direct Star Trek movies 3 and 4 established Leonard Nimoy as a successful Hollywood director.
Okay, cut it. Good. It's cut.
And then 3 Men and a Baby was this monstrous hit. Very inexpensive film, did gigantic box office. So for 2 years in a row, I had top 10 movies as a director in this career that I had just sort of said, I'd like to do this.
But success had its price.
I would want for someone to be waiting for me with a drink the moment the work finished.
And that's illogical, Mr. Spock.
I am not Mr. Spock. I am sick of being typecast. I am an actor.
When there was a time when I was heavily identified with Spock and I was concerned about whether or not it might hinder me from getting other work.
I am Leonard Nimoy, the actor. I will not be stereotyped.
And now, since the acting and directing career is finished anyway, it hardly matters.
Okay, Len, one more time.
I think it's a wonderful character to be identified with.
To be or not to be, that is illogical, Captain. No, wait, please, give me another chance. Just one more chance. I didn't mean to say that.
It just doesn't matter these days. It's fine. It's fine. I'm very happy with it.
Being so closely associated with his Starfleet persona has brought some surprising opportunities for one former member of the USS Enterprise.
Star Trek was a double-edged sword. I did lose some roles, but I got some roles that I probably would not have gotten otherwise. I've even done panto in Britain.
Fascinating.
Why would they cast an Asian American actor from Los Angeles? It's because I was able to sell tickets, and that thanks to Star Trek.
George TK's fame has brought benefits beyond the bright lights of Pantoland. In Los Angeles, he's been a campaigner for the Japanese-American community. As chair of the board at the new Japanese-American National Museum, he's been able to raise awareness of a chapter in American history that had a profound effect on his childhood.
In 1942, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, this country was swept up in war hysteria, and simply because, and only because, we looked like the enemy. We were Japanese Americans. We were rounded up wholesale from the West Coast and sent to 10 internment camps scattered in some of the most God-forsaken places in this country. And in our case, we were sent to the swamps of Arkansas, Camp Rower. I was very young then. I was 4 years old. And for me, the barbed wires became part of the landscape. But for my parents to have lost everything, our home, business, our freedom, it was a devastating experience.
In Leonard Nimoy's more peaceful childhood, photography was his hobby. In later life, it's become his passion.
Photography had always been there as an occasional retreat to get into, to be creative when I needed it. It was a great creative outlet for me. And I started working on a lot of female figure work, which had always intrigued me. I always enjoyed studying it, learning about it. It's more difficult than it looks. And the book has done extremely well. I have a couple of galleries carrying the work. So I'm developing a reputation.
What a wonderful idea for him to have. Photograph naked women to while away his days. I mean, extraordinary invention. I thought, why didn't I think of that?
But the biggest change in Leonard Nimoy's life has nothing to do with his newfound career. It's the acceptance of the fact that, from the last years of Star Trek onwards, he had a serious drink problem.
I would want for someone to be waiting for me with a drink the moment the work finished. I never drank during the day, never drank until the work was done, but the moment the work was done, I would get terribly impatient if there wasn't a drink waiting for me now. And then I would drink until my head hit the pillow. Wouldn't stop. Alcoholic. Clearly alcoholic. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was clinically depressed and even suicidal. There were days when I was waking up and saying to myself, the work is great. I've achieved far more than I ever dreamed I could, and I don't know why I want to live this day. And those are dangerous thoughts. Years later, when I got into this marriage, and I professed to my wife how my life was now worth living and how happy I was. Eventually, one day, she said to me, then, why are you still doing so much drinking? And I thought, you know something, you're right. Why? Can I stop? And I looked for help, and I got it.
Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies.
No tears, tears.
Famous, if not infamous, for his eccentric musical career, recognised also for his role as TV cop T.J. Hooker, William Shatner has always been able to command an audience's attention, whether strutting his stuff on stage or astride the saddle of one of his handsome thoroughbred horses.
Business manager says, don't own anything that eats while you sleep. And you never buy a horse. Like you never take a single potato chip, you never buy one horse. So it mounted over the years, and I've got a great stable called Bell Rev. We raise and train and sell wonderful horses. I started a horse show to benefit handicapped kids, and we called it the Hollywood Charity Horse Show. We've been benefiting a charity called Head with Horses that uses riding as therapy for kids who can't move or sometimes can't think, or who can't think and can't move, or can't move and can't think. I mean, the variety of children that get benefit from this.
And one of the other charities supported is the Noreen Shatner Foundation in memory of his third wife, who died aged 40 in their swimming pool in the summer of 1999.
Millions of Star Trek fans are in mourning today after the death of DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. Kelley, who was 79, was in more than 70 episodes of the series, as well as 6 feature films.
He was so simple and clear and clean, and all he wanted to do was perform and live in his house and be with his beautiful wife and walk his dog and cut the grass and come on the stage and be an actor. That was DeForest.
In 1991, Star Trek lost another key character when creator Gene Roddenberry died. Known affectionately to fans as the Great Bird of the Galaxy, it's only fitting that his ashes were rocketed into space. And it's not just the departed heroes of Star Trek who are remembered. To dedicated Trekkers, mementos from the original series are objects of an almost religious devotion.
A studio just can't keep old sets for no reason, especially when the show's a failure. So the bridge of the Enterprise, with all its contents, including the captain's chair and the various readout panels, was deposited in a dumpster. That chair eventually turned up at a Star Trek auction about a year ago, I think.
We sold it for $265,000.
19, 20, $2,000 right there!
During that same sale, some of the hand props that had been discarded were used, were worn.
Come on! 23!
A communicator. Well, that sold for $45,000.
That's wonderful!
Star Trek memorabilia for the first series is gold.
Walter Koenig knows all about the collecting game, but it's not Star Trek that inspires him. Walter's house is packed with books and badges and cartoon characters.
I love the figurines. The Big Little books were the first things that I collected, but the pinback buttons, you might call them badges, but these buttons like political buttons, they're all comic character, and they date back to the 1890s. I have over 1,000 pieces from that period. It's the only Star Trek collectibles I have is me. It's Chekhov figures, and plates. And actually, I'm looking for a pewter mug. If you ever come across it, that's really it has a Chekhov in relief.
The Enterprise has finally landed, but Star Trek continues to hold us all in its orbit. Whether we're a cast member, a fan, or simply someone who's ever said, "Beam me up, Scotty," Star Trek's characters and its catchphrases are destined to be remembered forever.
Live long and prosper.
Fascinating. I've always wanted to say that. He says it all the time, but this time I got to say it. I'm going to say it again. Fascinating.